School Perceptions Facilities Survey. Before we begin, I do want to mention just a few things. First of all, I want to thank Kathy because, pardon, there was no pledge.
It's the regular board meeting, and it'll be next week.
Our normal
We'll say it
board
twice,
meeting,
isn't
that's, I need to just sort of explain some things. Our normal board meeting that we would have had tonight is now scheduled for next week, and we will combine our 2 regular board meetings for December next week. So tonight, we were just going to concentrate solely on the facilities discussion. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming. Some of you have to be here, some of you don't, and I want to thank those of you that are coming to participate in this process. I also wanted to thank Kathy. She brought us some food. We'll probably, when the meeting's over, we'll take a bite. As always, Kathy does a great job helping organize us. Thank you for that. Also, I want to mention John Jones has gotten called away for work, but he is going to be participating given there's no decisions being made tonight and he has some questions. We are going to have him on the speakerphone here too, and we'll try to answer some of his questions as we go along tonight as well. I also want to mention this will be coming again before the board in next week on the 15th. So at that time, we will have a portion of the meeting for the public to speak to us about your questions and concerns, and at any time, you can call any one of us in between there or administration to get your questions answered, because we certainly want to be working closely with our community on these important decisions that relate to our future presentation. Did I cover everything?
Perfectly.
I hope so. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Holtz, and you can introduce our guests.
And I'm going to turn it right over to Mr. Foster from the School Perceptions, and he can introduce himself, maybe give a little background.
Let me mention that we, as a board, we commissioned School Perceptions to do a survey for us, because we know that we have multiple needs in this district, and we really felt that we needed to connect with our community to find out what those needs are. So that's how this survey came about. So thank you. And Bill from School Perceptions is going to give us the results.
So thanks for inviting me tonight, and I'm happy to be back. I think this is actually our 3rd or 4th community survey we've done for the Whitnall School District. So I actually knew where to park and where to go to, so I haven't changed that. So again, I'm with School Perceptions, and our role in this process is to, as objectively as we can, come back and say, this is really what your community wants, this is what your community values. We work closely with the architectural firm and the construction firms in the world, but we're not advocating for any particular solution. Our job is to be objective and independent, so that was our goal with doing the survey. So the way we do this is we mail out a survey, and we want to be inclusive. We want everybody to have the opportunity to participate. So we mailed out surveys to every household in the district, and people could participate online, or they could do it via paper. And as of last week, probably Wednesday, we had 1,634 responses, 545 via paper. We have gotten a few more paper back. Yes, sir.
Do you want us to ask questions as we go, save them for later? What do you want?
Whatever you'd like. If you want to ask as we go, fire away.
Okay, thank you.
So how many surveys were sent out?
So the answer is, well, I think it was whatever, about, David, do you know? 8,000?
Okay. Okay.
About 75 to 8,000. We've got a few more paper in, but from a statistical standpoint, actually when you get to about 400, you're at about a margin of plus or minus 5%. So we're up to 1,634. So it's very, very good data. And I'm going to get into more detail of how we remove any bias from that data in just a second. Right now we're at 18% response rate.
So 1,600 did online?
No, that was total responses. So about 1,100 did it online.
Okay.
545 did it by a few.
And what is 18%? What is that in history of you doing these surveys?
Well, the standing...
What kind of response is that?
Yeah, the standing joke in our office this year, this fall, is it seems like everybody's at 19%. So you're probably 1% low. I have a feeling that when we finalize your report, you'll probably be at 19%. We do see some go as high as 30, some a little bit lower, but I'd say you're right at average.
Okay.
So we used a couple demographic questions. This is actually a question we used in our last community-wide survey. And which is age, which is a pretty obvious one. It's a little different way than we normally present it, but we wanted to keep things the same. So when we look at the senior citizens, so I always group the 67 to 75, and I'm not sure why we did this last time we did a survey, but 76 and older. But we're at about 20% seniors, and actually we've got maybe a few more that are in the 65, which in the green bar. From a 2010 census, you want to be at about 16.8 or 17% seniors. We're actually a bit overrepresented in our seniors in the survey data, but that's actually good, because when it comes to vote, the seniors actually are a bit overrepresented in voting. So this is that's always a good sign. And the youth, the 18, I don't know, I'm over 50 now, so I think everybody's young, but 18 to 25, they're underrepresented, but again, they don't normally vote as often as our seniors do. We did ask, in which municipality do you reside? We've got Hales Corners representation, Greenfield, Franklin, and do not live in the district. The do not live in the district probably ended up there for one of two reasons. One is we did ask staff to participate, and even if they live in the district, they will be included in wherever it says resident. That means we're going to include them. We remove non-residents from any financial support question. But we wanted all staff to be included, so we had their data so they could also answer people's questions on what was that survey all about. We wanted to say we don't
We're open enrollment people included?
open enrollment
allowed
parents
to?
were included, but again, they won't be included in the financial support questions.
And do we know how many households asked for a second ballot?
I do not know that.
I would have to look. We had a handful of people that called in and asked for, but they called 3 different people asking for it because they had different options to call, so I'd have to check on that.
Okay.
This is actually it's formatting a little bit different on Mac. Are you an employee? We're at 12%, 12.25%, and 88% said no. This is interesting. We'll see what this looks like as we go. Do you have school-age children? We're actually split. Half of our respondents that were parents, half were non-parents. And then if they said they were parents, I apologize for the, I wonder if I can do it. Let me see. I'm not a Mac person, so this might be. Yeah, I can bring up a PDF then.
I think that'll work better, Bill, because what we put out in the board packet
Okay.
is a lot clearer.
How do I maximize this for us, our non-Mac guys?
Go to view full screen.
Oh, this is gonna work better. Okay. So if they were parents, in which school did they attend? You can see we had representation from all the Whitnall schools. We had 6% public school outside the district, 5% private parochial, 2% other, and 0.39% homeschool. So we're not gonna use this data a lot at the high level, but we have it available to disaggregate if needed, as well as the additional relationship question. Parents of a student that attended, Whitnall School District graduate, parent of children younger, and so on and so forth. So then we get into communications, and we ask the question, how would you prefer to receive school district information? Am I in the way?
No, I'm
Okay, I'm sorry. And here we thought it made sense to take staff members out of this particular analysis and look at parents and non-parents. And then, so parents are in blue, non-parents are in red, and then we sorted based on parents. And you can see the prevailing preference would be email for the parents and district mailing second. And we can kind of sort it down. You can see where it pops out where the Hales Corners now is 23% for our non-parents. Greenfield now is 14%, and the Journal Sentinel's at 12% for our non-parents. And this was a question we actually asked in our last survey. Overall, how effective have the district's communications efforts been over the past year? And we thought it would be interesting from a longitudinal standpoint to say, well, have we gotten better? So we sorted by parents and non-parents. And overall, this district does an extremely good job communicating. It's not uncommon to see not very effective and extremely ineffective up around 30 or 40% when you group them. And when you compare them to the last time we did the survey, the district's actually improved. So you're doing a good job. So then we really get into the meat of the survey, which had to do with facilities. And it's really started out with explaining the background information on Hales Corners Elementary. It's an older building. It has a pretty significant list of needs and investments that need to be made into it. We had 3 options we tested. The first one was to renovate the existing building. Another one was to build onto the middle school. Or the third was to build a new school at the existing site. So we asked people, how important is it to maintain a school at the Hales Corners Elementary location? Now here we broke it into, first of all, this is only residents. So the blue bar is all residents. The staff is in red. The parents are in green. And the purple is in non-parent, non-staff. You can only be voted, or you only get 1 vote. So you can't show up in more than one of the, you're either staff, parent, or non-parent, non-staff. And in the statistical world, we call this a bimodal distribution, which means, well, there's some people who think it's very important, and then there's a group who thinks it's not important. It's not a bell-shaped curve. It's kind of you're in one camp or the other. There are some people that say it's somewhat important.
Bill, could we clarify that category of staff residents? Is that a teacher who teaches at Hales Corners but also lives in either
Yes.
Hales Corners, Greenfield, or Franklin?
They have to live in the district.
So staff resident truly is a staff resident?
They are a staff resident.
Okay.
So if they're a staff member and they don't live in the district, they would not be included in this analysis.
Okay.
And in fact, they will not be included in any question that has to do with money.
Okay.
So then we get to, once we explain the needs, we asked about the location preference, then we really get to the money question, which is, would you likely support a referendum to address the needs at Hales Corners Elementary? And again, you can see the breakdown from, I'm really looking at the staff, the parents, and the non-parents. And the majority of all respondents, irregardless of group, said yes, but we would support that. We had 25% of our non-parent, non-staff saying they would not support a referendum, but 57% said they would. And by the way, the purple, in my mind, is the most important group because they're about 75% of your community. Your parents are important to have on board, your staff is very important to have on board, but from a, who gets the most votes, the non-parent, the non-staff people do, and they're the purple ones. And you can see there's a group right around 18 to 20% that are undecided. That's pretty high for an undecided, but I think that is a function of, well, which option are you going to go with? I'm undecided until you declare which plan you're going to propose. So then we ask the question, well, if yes, if you would support a referendum, how likely would you be? So you could be definitely yes, probably yes, undecided, probably no, or definitely no. What you're seeing on the screen is a simple average. So for instance, if all respondents would have said definitely yes, it would be a 5. You can't get better than a 5. You can't get lower than a 1. So anything north of a 3 is leaning towards either probably yes or towards a definitely yes. So you can kind of see across the board that we really have 3s for the first 2 options, and we dip down just below the for the third, well, what tested the lowest was building an elementary school addition at the Whitnall Middle School. And from a statistical standpoint, these are the first 2 options, the build, new, and renovate, are very, very close, obviously. And it's 0.02 difference in the all residents when you look at all residents. And actually, what's interesting is the build new was actually a more expensive option than the renovating. But those tested the highest with the Kind of a clear third was building an elementary school addition at the Whitnall Middle School. That one's really significantly lower. So then, in addition to the elementary school need at the district, we identified about 2.5 to 3.5 of what we found were the most urgent maintenance needs. And then we explained what those would be, including the heating and ventilation and mechanical and lighting and cooling systems and all that. Then we asked the question, would you support a $2.5 to $3.5 million referendum to address these needs? And here we have all residents at 64%. Staff is at 61%. Parents are at 75%. And our non-parent, non-staff, again, the most important group, still a majority are saying, yes, we support the maintenance and energy efficiency projects. These are very good results. We do a lot of these surveys, and it's not always as much fun. Sometimes you have to come and tell the board your community is not supportive. These are very encouraging results. Then we get into really a third need, which has to do with primarily the pool. And we provided some background, and we said the cost is between $5 and $7 million. And would you support a referendum to renovate the high school swimming pool? Now, this would be $34 to $47 in addition to the other projects. Here we have all residents at 51%. The no's are at 31%, so they're leaning towards more positive. But as we're learning, we have to break it down to remove any bias. The staff is at 50-34. Parents are on board with this. But our most important group, the non-staff, non-parent, they're only at 42% with a 39% saying no. So right around this time in the presentation, the board will always say, well, Bill, how does the undecided usually vote, right? Because if the undecided all goes yes, then we're good. If they move no, we're not so good. And the answer is typically undecided more often goes no than yes. In fact, usually if you can get a third of the undecided to go yes, you're pretty lucky. The other variable, the other dynamic that we did not test, it's very difficult to test, is this is an additive cost. In other words, if this was done in addition to maintenance, in addition to the elementary school, it's likely that this support would drop. Okay? So this is probably the most important slide in considering what to do with the swimming pool. And I think that's all of my data. So questions on that part?
Do you have the questions that were asked on the slide for the swimming pool?
This would be it. Well, would you support a referendum to renovate the high school swimming pool?
That's the exact question.
Was the
That's
question.
exactly.
We didn't give any background?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That was the
we did.
slide before.
Yeah.
I'll give you all kinds of background.
All right,
So this is the background that was provided.
Right.
all right, good.
So, it looked to me like there was a 20% kind of undecided and another maybe 15, 20, 25% no. And my experience with referendum is that's pretty consistent, that there's going to be a certain percentage that just won't support
We'll never vote
it.
for anything, true.
But overall, you know, that 20% undecided is still going to be pretty critical
It's pretty
voice,
critical.
right?
It absolutely will be. And the undecided, I think now you're to the point where we have to narrow it down and say, well, which option are we going to go with? And then you might lose a few, you might gain a few as you pick your plan. I think from I guess my experience, I was a bit surprised. Usually when you do a survey, whatever is the least expensive always tested with the most important. A lot of people respond to these things saying, what's the cheapest solution? I'll go with that. In this case, that didn't exactly happen. In fact, I think a lot of people said, it strikes me that it makes more sense to build new versus remodel, for not the least of which we have complete flexibility and there's no school interruption. Otherwise, people questioning, concerned about what would that interruption look like, how would that be done, how would that be pulled off. It's, the architects and builders do it all the time, but it's more complicated than building new. So I think those were kind of the reasons why that the bill new just went a little bit higher.
Okay, any questions for Bill? Other questions for Bill?
Kind of just more of a comment. I had attended the HCPTO meeting, and one of the parents did kind of say that he was somewhat undecided because he really didn't feel like he had enough information to make a decision one way or the other. So we didn't give a lot of particulars about what it would look like or, anything like that. So I think that kind of, might be playing into our
Could be part of
undecided.
it, and it's always the board's always in a difficult position, because if you get too far ahead of it, people will criticize you, saying you've already made up your mind, you've already got all these drawings and renderings and concepts. If you don't provide them any information, they say we can't make up our mind because there's not enough information. I think we've struck a good balance, because we've kind of defined it, we've wrapped our minds around what it would likely cost. But not every project was detailed down to the last line and door and then strip.
And another comment someone had, which kind of, the data kind of goes against this, which was kind of nice to see, is someone had said that it seemed like we had made up our mind based on the cost. And so it was kind of good to see that, we knew that we hadn't made up our minds, but it was kind of interesting that somebody had that perception, but yet, when the data came through, that really wasn't, that's not how it actually turned out anyway, so.
So in the written comments, was there anything specific? There were additional comments, correct?
There are additional comments, and we're actually working through the comment report right now.
Okay.
What I always tell the board is you'll drive yourself crazy if you try to develop a strategy based on comments. Because you're going to read, one person will say, I think the swimming pool is the most important thing in the world. And the next person will say, how can you possibly be thinking about a swimming pool when you've got all these elementary school needs? And then, so you can't set strategy by comments. So you want to use this data to set your strategy. You want to use the comments to refine your strategy. So I know we're just finishing up entering a few more surveys. When we get all those in, probably by the end of this week, we'll provide our comment analysis. But there was nothing really surprising in the comments, but we'll have that work done shortly.
Can you go to the slide with the, each individual city, the amount of participation?
Sure.
Okay. Now can you go to the slide with the,
Well, a question on here, I wanted to note before you move away from this, that looked pretty representative of our district. It's like 39% comes from Hales Corners, interestingly enough, of our student population. And about 33%, I want to say, somewhere in that area come from Greenfield. And then we have 6% from Franklin. So it's interesting how close that aligned, I guess,
Okay, so it's
to our
fairly
student
representative.
population. Now, did you say you pulled out the do not lives?
Do not lives are not included in any question that had to do
Right.
with money.
Okay, thank you.
then can you go to the first money question?
First money question. This money question or the other first money question?
Say that again.
No, I like this one.
This is kind of a money question. This one isn't a specific money question, but this one ties to this guy.
Can you hear me, John?
Yeah, just, I can hear you well right now. Softly broken up.
Do you have a question?
Okay, so
You
if
do.
we,
So I'll get to the emailed ones in a minute, okay? Hold on.
if we look at the broad spectrum, and Bill, you've probably got the numbers off the top of your head. If I'm interpreting this correctly, we have 63% of all residents would support a referendum for Hales Corners, but that's somewhat tied as to whether or not it's a renovate versus new. We have 51% that would support, of all residents, that would support a renovation for the pool, and 64% for energy. Is that it in a nutshell?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The piece that worries me is we did not test an additive price. In other words, the question is, were people doing the math in their heads to say, oh, this could be 140 plus 17 plus 40, whatever they are, and where it could approach, I don't know, $200 or something like that.
Right.
So we did not test that, and I think I think most people probably, I mean, people are smart, and a lot of them do that math, but we didn't ask that question. We didn't say, we didn't test a grand kahuna plan that includes everything. And I suspect that, and I guess my experience is as price goes up, support drops.
Okay,
So
but we also didn't ask them to prioritize either.
we did not. We did not. You can have some sense for the degree of support for each one. So I would say it'd probably be safe to say that the elementary issue tested with the most, with a close second being the maintenance and then the third was the pool.
Well, the question then becomes, is how significant in your experience is that point spread? We've got 1 percentage point between Hales Corners and the energy project, but we've got a couple more points in between the Hales Corners and the pool. So what's your feeling for how significant that differential is?
Well, I think that's a significant third between the maintenance and the pool is pretty significant. The other question the board has to say is, well, there's a couple things. One is there's different ways to finance and fund energy projects. So that's something to think about. I'm of the camp, focus on, if the board can agree on what is our most pressing need, let's focus on that, let's get it done. And then what I see a lot of districts do is say, let's develop a phased approach. We're not going to say we're not going to do the other things, but we're going to put that, just as you would approach your own home, where you don't say, I've got my new furnace, my new roof, and my garage door. You say, what's the most pressing? I'm going to do that. I think people apply the same logic to schools. It's kind of let's go in it in terms of phases, if you can do that. And I'm not intimate with all your projects, but yes.
I was also thinking, when I look at some of the other area referendums that have been out there, there have been where they've broken projects, down and, maybe one part was approved and this, a second part, be an auditorium or whatever it was, may not have been approved initially. So I was kind of hoping that, residents would be thinking along that lines, that it wasn't necessarily all comprehensive, but would give
And
some
that's certainly a
feedback,
decision.
but they would add.
There's, one strategy is let's bundle it. I'm not a fan of that. I'm more of a fan of saying let's let the voters decide, especially if they're fairly independent. Or let's break them apart and do them in different phases. I think that's the strategy question that we're going to get to next.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, can you go to the other money question, please?
This one? Or the maintenance?
Yeah, let me look at this for a little bit here.
Okay.
I think that we did do a good job of informing the people of what the costs were. And I have talked to, I'm not going to say a lot, but a fair amount of people that were very glad that it was written out this way. And did calculate, well, I was at a sheepshead game. And the father looked me right, and I was winning too, let me tell you.
Playing for peanuts, right?
No, and he looked me square in the eye and said, what's it going to cost me? And I said, blah, 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 on a $200,000 house, and he didn't budge, But I think we did do a good job of informing them what it would be. Because when Doug does when we do the budget analysis and we do the budget, it's all based on $100,000 increments for a home. So people may be used to it, maybe not, maybe they don't pay attention, I don't know. But we've been consistent with that. And
I think we did a good job here. I think the question is, as you add on more and more, do people, when you answered the question, was it for everything or was it for the elementary school?
I think people were pretty attuned to what we were asking.
Okay.
I think so.
There was a question about the renovation cost. How did that get to be so high? It's not for you, it's for the board, really. And I think I can answer it and then you can add on, but originally, we were looking at a bunch of different options for the renovation of Hales Corners Elementary, but it wouldn't have compared to a new school. So the board had, through the facility committee, and I think the other discussions, we had decided that we want to, it wouldn't make sense to renovate and not address all the needs. So we asked the administration to come up with a comparable, if we were going to renovate, and it's going to meet the needs of our children with disabilities, our energy concerns, our learning concerns, there was something else, there were the energy, the, the safety
That's how it
concerns of
started.
renovating so that our buildings are safe when, children, if an intruder would ever want to enter. And our building is way away from what it needs to be. So in thinking through all those needs, is that correct? That's how this number came up, right?
Right, we
Stephanie, I'd ask you.
started trying to address safety needs and knowing that
Safety.
the main entrance to the school
Okay.
was open. And then when, again, like Luann had said, when we started looking at just mushroom from there, that is,
Right.
okay, if you're gonna put the entrance to the back, what other renovations do you do? And it just grew up from there, and that's how we got to that number.
Okay.
And the way I would term it is, as a board, we kept saying, we need to compare apples to apples, apples to apples,
Apples to apples.
So it would be like if we would, at the end of the day, no matter which project we had, any of those would meet the needs of all the needs that we were looking at,
Right.
so.
That should answer that question. Then there was another question about the pool. How did the weight room become part of the swimming pool project? If I recall, in order to address the pool, it does bump into the weight room, doesn't it?
No, the wrestling room.
And that somehow,
You have to put the grandstands, the
Okay.
viewing area into
the
the
wrestling room?
wrestling room.
And so that causes issues, and somehow, how did the weight room get added
I
onto
think it's
that?
just needed.
It was
It was just another need,
another need that kind of grouped in with.
group it in. If you're
With
going to
the
fix
athletics.
one, why not fix the other?
Some
Okay.
of it was also usage.
Yeah.
Because when the weight room had gotten renovated 10 years ago, more than 10, I think, then it also became a fairly well-utilized, and with the powerlifting group and all the other athletic training that goes on, then again, that was, okay, economies of scale. If we're going to be in that area of the building, if we're looking at renovating the pool and that upper wrestling gym, we're in that area anyway. This room could also use some attention as well, and we're taking advantages of economy of scale.
So this research has been going on for well over a year, really prior to this board. The past board and facility committee has been studying multiple plans and multiple options, so things have changed along the way, so it's good to get these questions answered now for people that might have them. Okay, other questions before we start to talk about what do we want to do next? What do we want to do next? Okay, are you going to give us some recommendations, or is this as far as you go?
Well, I'd be happy to, based on my experience, I guess, share. So the first decision the board has to make is, I think, on the elementary level, where do we go? And it's very, very close, and argument could be made, really from a data standpoint. You could go either way to remodel or build new. The build new did edge out the remodel. I think from a practical standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, I think the building new, to me, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we'd be moving backwards if it'd be throwing good money at bad money. And we can't do it to that school. The classroom size right there, the classroom size are 300 square feet, smaller than Edgerton. They have no storage, they have no lockers. What the teachers and administration do there is spectacular, that there isn't disease running all over that school. I mean, it's true, it really is. And my kids even go there. And just through the tours that we went through there, my God, they're angels. And why would we, yeah.
So I think the difference is that, I think the other exciting thing from a architectural standpoint is the flexibility that a new clean sheet of paper provides versus trying to model what you have. So that'd be my first recommendation. I'm not that familiar with clearly, I guess I am familiar with the needs in terms of the maintenance and energy and really there's an $8 million need that was whittled down to 2.5 to 3.5. I think now the board can decide, I think your first decision is, there's this need, this is pretty clear, there's clearly support. How would you want to finance that? And I think you've got two options to do that. If you were to say we want to include this in the referendum, your options are, well, it could be a separate question, or it could be included in a base plan or a base project. I don't have a strong recommendation. I think that's really up to the board. And lastly, on the pool, pools are very difficult for districts to pass. There are clearly fans and supporters and advocates of pool, but in relative terms, pools will always test with less support than anything that has to do with providing academic support for students. When they have success, and I'm working on one right now, another swimming pool, but that's the only thing the district's talking about. It's moving along well. From a messaging standpoint, the more complex something is, the less people understand it, the more challenging it is to define the need and the options and the opportunity, and therefore the pool would be competing with the elementary school. So from a conservative standpoint, I would not include it, but if the board says, no, you don't understand, Bill, there's really this huge need and we've got to move forward, then you could consider a second question with the pool. But you always run the risk, the more that's on the ballot, if people are doing the math and saying, geez, if these two things were to both pass, then I couldn't afford it, so I might say no to both. That's the risk you run.
Okay, so let's go back to the HC. How is the board, and we're going to talk about it, think about it, and talk about it. So it's not all a done deal tonight. But I think if we really have some strong feelings one way or another, we should address those now and maybe be thinking about a potential moving forward in this direction tonight. And then we can think about it, listen to you, get feedback from our audience, and hopefully in about 2 weeks have a better sense of how, united can the board get around which plan. So how about HCE? It looked, if you want to go back to that chart, let's talk about that first. What is your sense of, there appeared to be pretty good support for doing something. So the question would be, do we want to build new or do we want to renovate? And the arguments again for new are that it would really help because you could be building new and you don't have to displace kids. They can stay at the old school. There are some real benefits to that. Is there something else you want to share with us?
Renovating is, and we have tons of construction people out here right now, but renovating is typically going to be more expensive per square foot than building new. And from an administrative standpoint, a parent standpoint, what do we do with the kids while we're remodeling? If we're tearing off half the building and remodeling that half, it's a logistical nightmare. I mean, we'd have to get lots of trailers, we'd have to rent a church basement if we could, and then we'd have all the transportation issues. This isn't the fact that the site is so, I mean, it's designed perfectly where the kids could stay in their current school for the year of construction, and then everybody moves across the parking lot to the other side. That makes from a safety and logistical standpoint, a lot more sense. And then the rest of it, the political part, that's you guys.
Well, being a Greenfield resident, I could say, forget about Hales Corners. What do they need? What do I want to pay for a new school for them for? So I'm really glad that it came back, not with that attitude. I really am, because this district needs it. I agree that why would we want to put our students, our faculty, our administration through a remodel when yes, it's a lot of money, there's no doubt. But when you're, and I don't want to minimize that, but when you're spending this kind of money, why wouldn't we go new? With the drawings we've seen, the place is going to be fantastic. I didn't even think I have another kid, just send them there. Don't tell my wife, because
Hope your wife isn't watching.
Barb, No, 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 no. Okay? But really, the drawings that we've seen, the drawings that we've seen are really, really spectacular. And for that amount of money, my God, that's great,
Okay.
you know?
Okay, Stephanie, how are you feeling about this? And a pass is okay. Not ready.
You know, gosh. I would love to see a new building on the same site. I think it would be good for the kids. I think ultimately it serves our community better as a whole. I think it opens up opportunities for partnerships within that community. I think it could be another jewel in the Whitnall crown, quite frankly. I think of the efficiencies we could have from a building that you don't have to go upstairs to go down. I think about how it would be nice not to have 1949 and 1992 construction in the same place. I think a new school would be marvelous. But I also think of the taxpayers. I think of what we're asking them to put out regardless of which option we choose. I think that there are some families that no matter what we choose, it's going to be a hardship for them. And I need to be sensitive to that as well, because education shouldn't have to bankrupt anybody, and certainly not public education. And that's a concern.
Okay. How about down there? Someone down there like to comment? Nancy?
Well, I certainly echo Stephanie's comments, and I would like to see some of the comments from the survey. And I think I'd like to hear from our residents. I mean, to me, I know that you think that 18% is a good response, and I don't know. To me, it's not that great of a response. I mean, we're looking at, you know, all the residents, 3.35 say this. Well, no, it's not all the residents. It's only 1,500 residents that have replied. So, I don't know.
Jonathan?
I think when you look at the difference per $100,000 of the two options, the potential benefit that the new school would have versus renovating is astronomical. I mean, when you're looking at potentially $20 per 100,000 difference, maybe 30. I think if you're looking at return on investment when you're trying to sell your property, having a new school and district would help that. The opportunities it gives us moving forward in the 21st century with technology, we can't do that right now. I mean, what we're looking to do with the renovation won't even bring us technology-wise to where we need to be to compare to other districts. So going the new route, I think short-term and long-term, it benefits everybody in the district. I agree it's going to be a hardship for everybody that has to do it. When you break it down, if you're going to be paying $100 to 113 versus 127 to 140, if you look at it from that lens, the difference between the two is not that much versus the benefit it'll have on the district as a whole. All the kids that are in it now that will be going through, and all the families that'll get to utilize I just think it makes the most sense for everybody.
Eileen?
Well, I've kind of gone like full circle on this, where I don't know. It's tough. You want to balance, your tax rate because you want to have a district where young families can move in, but you also have a school with one part of the building that is quite old and quite needy. Renovate just part of it, so then you have one really nice part of the building, and then you still have one that's gonna need to be attended to at a later time. Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense when you're doing this over 20 years. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards the build new. I think it also is the most practical to not disrupt the lives of students and staff. I mean, the only negative I see is I kind of like the way the building is like set on the property now, and but sometimes you can't have everything that you want, and I guess the scheme of things that I could live with not being able to do that. And I think when you're, what we're doing now, and we're gonna be paying for this over the next 20 years, I mean, we need to do what is going to be good for the next 50 years, so to do a piecemeal might not be the right idea.
Okay, John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Are you in any way, shape, or form ready to comment on these three plans of the, we're on the slide with the support for each of the following options for Hales Corners. Are you in a position to comment
Yeah.
or on which way you're
Well,
leaning at the moment?
I don't think so, but I mean, I feel like there's a couple other things I want to look at, but I did want to mention that I'm a little concerned, and it was kind of hard to hear some of what was going on, so I didn't want to be disruptive so much in the lab who behind everybody are also re-asked that maybe somebody already asked and answered. It was hard to hear, but I did want to know if anybody noticed, or maybe I'm looking at it wrong, the slide that said how important is it to you to maintain a school at Hales Corners Elementary location. I'm concerned that column for column, if you match up the colors between very important and non-important, it almost seems like, statistically within the margin of error, each column is at 5% or less. So it almost seems like people are, at least the respondents are a little bit potentially apathetic about the school to begin with. So they kind of question then, the rest of the I guess the rest of how they're looking at things when you answer. I mean, it's definitely a little bit of a divided concern for folks. I mean, let's face it, new is nice and you get everything you want. But I think if I could tell correctly, it was me that expressed the concern over, added expense to folks like for the next 20 years. How easy it is for folks right now to make ends meet. So. There's a lot to think about. So I really don't have a position at this point just to express concern.
Okay. And I'll just add on then to, that is good to pay attention to, that one. Well, all of you have made some pretty good points. I would just add that I had to talk to my husband about this. Well, we don't have kids in the system thing, and I'm like, well, yeah, but we pay to have quality schools that affect our community, and we always have had, honey. I just had to remind him of that. So, and the community here really does support its schools. It's pretty evident of that. So, I appreciate the sensitivity to possibly this additional cost would bankrupt someone no matter what we do. It's tough to find a perfect way to fund our schools, and people have been studying it for years, and they have not come up with anything perfect. But one thing the referendum does is it allows it to put it on the property taxes, thinking that property tax is one way to, that people have some money, they can own property, so that's the current system we've got. It isn't perfect, but I don't know that it would bankrupt anyone, but I would certainly want to hear from parents about that. If we get, some comments about that, let me just finish. But I do agree with what some of you have said. We should pay for the long-term bonds over 20 years. I could go with the renovation or the long-term. I'm not hearing any support, nor would I support the middle school option. Recently we had a really nice event at the high school, that craft fair. Oh my gosh. That's not a new school though, and it is difficult for the elderly to get around in that school. I saw more people with canes and crutches and trying to figure out how can you get up and down and around all those stairs. And it occurred to me that over time, the boards have to update their schools. They just have to. So how are we going to do that? And when I think back of how our buildings were designed, you hear stories that we designed them for a farming society so kids could get out and help with farming. Some things we haven't changed fast enough on. And then it was we built in buildings in an industrial society, so they're more square and they're a little bit different than they were. Now we're building them for a knowledge society, and a technology. So when you look at these changes over time, like I think Eileen said, 50 years, it's going to change again in 50 years, and that board will be talking about what to do then. So I personally would support the new school. I think that would give us the best community school, a building that would work for our community. It's used for other events than just educating kids. And I think that's worth the additional dollars that it might take. But I'm open to continuing to listen and deliberate on, and hear from the community. This is really what you want. It's what our community wants, and I'm really pleased that the board decided to go the route of doing a survey, at least to get the conversations started, to get some data, and I feel pretty good about that. But I too hope we can get more input. I think that's all I had to say. Quinn.
Can I speak to two things that Stephanie and Nancy spoke to? We knew going in, this is gonna cost money. If we have, and my record is real clear as far as spending and budget. If we didn't wanna present this and actually follow through with this, we should never got involved, because it's nothing but spending money here. And it's valid, it's needed, and it's warranted. As to your point about, you want to, 18%, well, these are the people that did it. These are the people that came forward and said, why do we need to go talk to more? These are the people that showed interest. It is very clear that our communication has been very good. And we got it out there. We reminded people. We got it in the places where outside of the parents, the residents would find it and were informed of it and reminded of it. We did our job. Now, I think we need to make a decision and not drag our feet, make a decision, and then put it out there and let the people vote on it. It's really that simple. But to say that, well, I don't want to bankrupt anybody, I don't either, but we knew going in the costs associated with all this. Then we're wasting our time, we're paying this man. It's over. I mean, it's too late for that discussion, in my opinion.
Any other comments? Otherwise, at the moment, I'm hearing more support for the new school, although we will be taking our time to listen to what you all want in our community. That's what I'm hearing, is that we're leaning toward the new school. I'm hearing, just speak up now if anyone disagrees, but I think we're taking the middle school option off the table at the moment. So we're down to just the two options.
Yeah, regardless of what this slide says, the fact
Okay,
that
John's with us too. Okay, sorry, John.
I mean, regardless of what, the not important up here,
Yeah.
the middle school option was a distant third. So I think we just have to
Okay.
take that off the table.
It is interesting, though, that
Doesn't tie out.
it's not, right, it's not important to a fair amount of people in this,
30%.
right. But then you go to the other slide, and they're all for it.
They said yes.
I think there's two variables in play with that. One is, this is isolating the variable of location. So that was the reason we did it, how important, so we've got that. And the question is, does that tie out and support the other data? I think it does, and the way it does is this combines a lot of other variables. Not in addition to location, it introduces cost, and then I think there are always concerns with grouping an elementary school into a middle school situation. A lot of districts do it. A lot of districts have K-12 schools where it's one building, but that could be what people are reacting to, which then shifts support back to a Hales Corners solution. So you have to kind of say, well, what are people reacting to? Cost, location, as well as what that combined elementary middle school will look like. So that you have to kind of think through that dynamic. The other thing from a referendum standpoint, the more things you change from the way it's always been, support typically drops. So right or wrong, it's just the more change makes people nervous. So the third option here represents the most change to people. I think that's the other thing that's showing up in the data. I think that's why it is the way it is.
All right.
So talk to them a little bit about your predictability of your survey results, because I unofficially call it freaky predictive. It's freaky predictive if you
Yeah.
follow the data, to your point.
So when we first started out doing surveys over 10 years ago, I was always asked, well, how predictive is the data? And I'd say, I don't know. I think this approach makes a lot of sense, but I don't know how predictive it is. And now we've done over 250 projects, and a lot of them have been with Kit and Epstein, and we actually go through the process from doing the survey to how it actually turns out, and it is very, very, very predictive. And the reason I think it occurs that way is although not everybody took the survey, the people who have developed an opinion took the survey. Those are the same people who then influence the thoughts and perceptions of their friends and neighbors of this is a dumb idea or this is a very good idea. So you've got the thought leaders, the influentials who have weighed in, who are also, by the way, the people who vote. So as it turns out, the data does end up being very, very predictive, not because I can prove that academically, but I can prove that pragmatically from having done it so many times. It is very, very predictive data. So you can have even if you don't believe it.
So if we only had two options, predict how the people that voted for the third option, how they would vote.
On the
So,
so I would say, based on the data, you can kind of see all residents, staff, that it's likely that that referendum would be very close but would fail. If it went out today.
Which one?
The
For the
third
middle
option.
school.
No, that's not what I mean.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, okay, so we're eliminating the third option.
okay.
But we had a group of people that voted for that third option.
Yes.
So
Well, they
can you
could vote on all
predict
three,
which?
You could
though.
all,
They could vote on all
It
three.
wasn't a mutually exclusive, so they
Right.
could have said yes, 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 or
Right.
yes, yes, no, or
Okay.
no, no, yes.
supported any of them.
Okay.
So that we don't know. Well, actually, I guess we do. There might be some people who supported the second, which said no, but would ultimately support the first. That we don't know.
Okay.
But they could put
And did you have to fill out the complete, the whole survey in order to count?
no.
And were there some partial?
There's some partial. There's pretty good on a paper. You can't force someone to check a box.
Well, because I'm thinking of the pool, and that was the last question asked.
Yep.
Do we know was there a drop-off in respondents?
No. In fact, although it was an 8-page survey, there was very few questions that were asked.
Mhm.
So I can answer that question quantitatively. I don't know, but it typically doesn't drop off. People who start the survey almost always finish it.
Finish it. Okay.
Okay, any other comments on the Hales Corners? All right, then, we'll move on to our second question. Well, I shouldn't say question, or facility issue, the need to, would you support 2.5 to 3.5 to address the needs and improve energy efficiency? This is the one where there are really some options. We wouldn't have to include this in the referendum, but how are you feeling? Do you guys want to start down there this time about supporting this?
Well, I support this. I'm not sure if I support it based on the referendum or the other option, and I think I would have to rethink that other option again. I think we need to kind of have a refresher on that other option.
Right, the borrowing. Okay.
I think we need to move forward with it, just determining how we want to.
To determine how we want to do it. Okay, how about this side? Eileen? Move it forward and just determine
How we, yeah.
how we fund it? Okay.
I
Clint?
didn't understand what you said, Nancy, or what you meant.
You know, we had that presentation to do
Oh,
that
okay,
energy.
yeah.
There are
That
different
other-
options.
the other
You
way
can
to
borrow
fund it.
some. You can get some grant money, isn't that?
Yeah.
Right. There's ways to fund this, so we could put that on the agenda to talk about at the next meeting.
Well, by going through 2 tours, and some of us have, of all the facilities, 2 different years, they're not improving. Especially the matters identified. I mean, they're needed. Yeah, they're
Okay.
needed.
Steph?
Oh, we have to.
We have to.
We're living on
Okay.
borrowed time with any of those energy issues, and we're just grateful to have the staff and the replacement parts and the know-how to take care of them as long as we have. We're not careless with our equipment, and thank heavens, but time's running out on these. We got to get it done somehow.
And you stated there was an $8 million option?
No, there's $8 million of identified potential projects, and in the process we went through is, of that 8, we
Yeah.
called it down and said there's 2.5 to 3.5
Okay.
are the most urgent.
Yeah.
of that 8. So it's not like this is the most urgent. And based on this slide, I think even our non-parent, non-staff are saying, okay, just
We
like
need to
the board,
take
it
it.
sounds like it's saying, okay, we get it. That's important. Really the question is how would it be funded?
And the high school auditorium HC, air conditioning is in this one?
Don't quote me on that, but we,
Yes, it is.
Could be included.
yeah,
Argument could?
it could, well, that's a
Yeah, I mean,
range
that-
up there.
No, I thought we went through this. It needs to be in there.
It says it in there, in the
Okay.
back.
It says upgrade cooling systems, improve classroom ventilation, and air conditioning in the high school gym.
Because if we go through all this and we don't get air conditioning in the high school,
It's listed in there, Quinn.
it's not gonna be good.
See,
Bottom
added air
point.
conditioning in the high school gym, last phrase,
Not could.
so.
It's in there.
Well, the could part is, we'd have to,
Did you mean gym or auditorium? You said auditorium.
You meant Jim.
Jim,
He meant gym.
yes.
I just want to retract that. I mean,
Because we all know that over and over and over, that is the biggest question to a lot of people on this board is when are we getting air conditioning for graduation?
okay. It's more than that, though, it's also.
It
sports.
is, but,
It is
but I'm
sports,
telling,
it's a
yes, it
slippery
is, but
floor,
that is,
it's
that
not-
is the
it's
number
not just
one.
graduation. There are
needs to
lots
be
of
on there.
reasons, yeah.
And when we did this, I would help, I was kind of at the meetings when they
Mm-hmm.
were doing the survey, and that's why that was actually kind of
Yeah.
included in that.
And it was a safety, it's a safety issue for sports,
We
for
knew that.
kids and
Yep.
slippery
Yeah.
floors, so
Yeah.
it is more than that. John, comments? John, on number 2? Not at this time, okay. Are you comfortable at least moving it forward, even though we may not have a way, for sure, we may not go to referendum, but we may do the other options to look at that?
Sure.
Okay, I didn't think you wanted to pull it off the table, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so we keep that one moving forward as well, okay? The third option is gonna be the pool. Okay, the pool was the section, the weight room pool. How's the board feeling about that? Quinn, you wanna start us off?
Well,
He's giving me that look.
Dr. Holtz offered to take a tour when we were able to have a meet. It had to be head-on-head, one-on-one, that's all we could handle. It's embarrassing. It is truly embarrassing to have to, first of all, walk through locker rooms to enter. Who knows who's showering? Second, those locker rooms are unhealthy. They're outdated, they're ridiculous. It is, then you get in there, you get into the pool, and it's a shell of a pool. You can't dive off, because it doesn't meet requirements, there's no blocks, you can't dive into the pool. And I, when they brought back pricing for this thing, I was amazed at $1 million for this locker room? Holy man. It's crazy the amount of money they want for all this. But you gotta understand, they gotta knock down a wall to get stuff in. But then you got the wall knocked down, you might as well replace it with some nice glass, I guess,
Only part of it, though.
Only part of it. I mean, so, I mean, it all goes up. But
Part.
if people would have the same opportunity that some of us and our students go through every day, it's filthy.
We will give
I mean, I'm not
public a
mad,
chance.
you've done a good job, there's no doubt. But it's 10, 20 years past its expectancy.
You can only do so much with it,
Right, and I know, and I also, I mean, in our custodial staff, if you go to HCE right now, and it is well-maintained, there's no doubt. You look at these baseboards, and I get paid to be looking for this stuff, and you look at it, it's clean, they do a nice job, really. Like you say, it's done. We need to upgrade. And, and I hear what you say, Bill, about, and that's gonna be a whole nother discussion about how do we bundle all this, or how do we present this, and my God, if we are so strong on HC being something happening there, and really, really, really a lot of support for the energy updates, but this pool thing, well, in my opinion, is to bundle them all together, and say, it's a package deal, in my opinion, because That way, we will garner some support. If it doesn't go through,
Okay,
you know,
I think we got it. You're supporting the pool. We should move that forward as well. Nancy, do you want to continue on? You want to support the pool and move that conversation as well forward?
Yeah, I agree with Quinn. I mean, the pool is usable, barely usable. The locker rooms are deplorable.
it's also our most used facility in the district.
Okay.
I think, Matt, I mean, you said how much the community, outside of just the students, utilize the weight room, the pool. Getting that piece out so people understand how much it's used outside of just students is so important, because it's not just the students using it at a meet during swimming season. It's year-round. You have it booked for community events, whatever it may be. I think that's so important. And plus, if you look at the amount of money that's been invested in Falcon Field and how well the powerlifting team is doing and everything, to not have the baseline infrastructure for them to have weight rooms and locker rooms to use while they're training to use Falcon Field or whatever it may be, we're not giving them the opportunity to maximize that. So if we're building up a robust, athletic base for our students, this is central to that. This prepares them to get there. And then the community benefit on top of it, it just makes sense to do.
John, do you want to comment, and then we'll come over here? John?
Yeah, I do. First off, I agree with most everything Quinn said, except I'm not sure the locker rooms are unhealthy. I do think they're unpresentable, and I do think it's inappropriate to be funneling the parents and other spectators through the locker rooms. We definitely need to do something. It is the most utilized athletic facility we have. There's no question in my mind we need to do something there. What I'm concerned with is two things. I wonder if we would have more support, and I mentioned this before, separating the weight room from this project would at least adjust the cost of the project a little bit. And I don't know, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Stephanie's response when it was said why we tied it together. But I do wonder if that would affect the outcome. And the other thing is, the design I saw was, and I think this was already mentioned by Quinn, it was awfully nice and awfully fancy. But the question is, how much money do we want to spend on fancy? Because my main concern is making it good and functional, not making it fancy. I mean, it's got to be good, functional, and presentable. But I don't know that it needs to. How much money really does that plan cost versus how much does good, functional, and presentable cost? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. All right. Eileen, did you and Stephanie want to comment?
That's fine.
You're good.
I guess my only thought is if we don't do the pool now and bundle it, how do we go, when can we possibly go back and cover that one too? I mean, so that's something to think about. If we don't try to do it all together and we know it needs to be done, can we go back in 2 more years and ask again? I don't know. A year? I don't know.
You mean the weight room needs to be done?
The pool
pool.
weight room. I will
Not
say. I will say, since I do have a son at the high school, that weight room is overutilized. So it's not. I mean, there can be. The students could use more space in the weight room because we've had some very successful programs. I know, like my own son sometimes won't even work out there because it's just too crowded. So, in a way, it's great. We've got these facilities that our kids are using to do something, that's healthy. So, there is a need there. I'm not personally tied into keeping that as part of it or not keeping it, but it's a small percentage of the total cost anyway.
Okay, so I would agree we should continue to look at this as part of the package and possibly look at the weight room as, maybe it doesn't all have to be done now. There's certainly going to be people in the community asking that same question. Do we need to do it all now? Why are we prioritizing it all? Why are we doing it all now? We have to be ready to answer that question. I'm really pleased that we're addressing all of the issues that we are at this time, though. This is a good time to do it. We have low rates of interest. We have the needs. They've been there a while. We've been studying for a year. So it sounds to me like we've really got good data. Thank you to the survey folks and to Kit for helping design that and administration and the people that worked on the team to get the survey. It's never perfect, but it was giving us some pretty good information. So to summarize, it sounds like we're going to bring forward then at the next meeting a couple of options of how we could bundle these 3 projects, and we can have that discussion at the next meeting. We will also look at some other ways of financing perhaps the energy. Is that right?
We'll include options with that,
Do you
yes.
have some, I should have given you a chance to comment. What do you think?
Well, we're going to be meeting next week,
Forgive me.
Monday again, and this is tentatively the first agenda as we went through. This is on the agenda as old business. Basically, what we're looking for is administration to keep going forward, you know, saying, yeah, we're going to be doing something, keep going forward. It looks like, you know, focus on the focus on the, if you decide building new, or at least bring that information back to us first. Something along those lines, and I put it in the cover sheet and all those things you need to consider. But January 19th isn't all that far away. So we're going to have a number of meetings between now and January 19th, as that's the time when you have to say, yep, this is what we're definitely going to put on for the referendum. And, you know, it's kind of a segue into the second agenda item. Yeah.
Right, I was just going to do that.
Okay.
Perfect.
So maybe.
But let's answer that question before we really get to that. Is everyone comfortable that we do move this forward for that April if we're going to go to referendum, it's looking pretty likely we are, and figuring out what we go for, are we all comfortable moving it forward that fast?
Yes.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
the reason why we
Yes.
can't go past?
Too much.
There's no fall election.
There's no
in
fall
Iowa.
election. And we can do a
You have
ref,
to have a special election and pay for all the costs associated with it.
okay, so I'm going to repeat that so John can hear that and the public can hear that, and the camera, that if we don't have the referendum in April, there will be an election in April, so our question would be on the ballot. There's no ballot for the fall. Once, I think every 3 years, there's a fall when there's no election, and this happens.
Every odd year.
Every odd year, okay, there's no election. So the board would have to fund all of the costs of doing a special election at that time, and I'm hearing it costs like $8,000 or more to, because we'd have to pay for the ballots, we'd have to pay for all the staff, and we'd have to pay for all of that at that time. Now, we didn't schedule public to be involved, and I see a hand up there, so can we get that question later, or would you? We didn't schedule public input at this time. So I see there's a hand up over there.
It will be scheduled for
Public
next
discussion?
next
At the
week, Monday.
At the next
And
one?
that's when the criteria is laid out. I mean, I'm
Okay.
sure it's a very legitimate question.
Yeah.
Well, look at your disclaimer here.
Right.
It tells you.
Yeah, items not on the agenda, we can't.
Right.
But could we allow for a question?
Yes.
I think so.
The board
Go ahead.
respectfully asks for
I
comments
need to-
focused on specifics. Yes.
Thanks. I'm John Walzak, I live in Hazel Corners, across from the elementary school. I just want to go on record and say,
Well,
I
this is,
don't-
if you have a question, because we
I don't
We
want
aren't
to
really
see, I
taking
don't want
notes.
to see this pool bundled into anything.
Okay.
It should be a separate issue. You're trying to sell something a large part of the community really doesn't care about.
Okay, thanks. We'll get into a lot more discussion at the next meeting, but thank you for that. Anyone else, as long as we've opened it up, anyone else have really strong feelings one way or another you'd like to share with us as we move forward? Yes.
I have a question. How accurate are your numbers when you sent that survey out, when you gave that range between 127 per 100,000? How accurate is that, or is there going to be an override?
In terms of the costs, I'll
Yeah,
let
yeah,
Laura.
when the survey came, it said if
Right.
you do the elementary school, it's going to range anywhere from 100 to 127. 100 to 127 per 100,000
Now,
value of that.
what-
How accurate is that, how are those numbers?
I can guarantee you that it won't go over ever, because once you put a number out into our community, we
We're in
can't go over
trouble if we
that.
do.
Okay.
All right, I mean, I'd be run out of town. I would really, this has been a very frugal board, very tax conscious. They're gonna push as hard as they can, and that's what we're gonna be doing over the next 8 weeks. We're interviewing construction managers Wednesday, and we're really gonna be beating them up to push it down, so that when it says, if it gives 100 as the low number and a range, it's gonna be closer to that 100.
Okay.
I'm very confident of that. I've worked with this firm, the architectural firm before. We argued over numbers already. They wouldn't let me go any lower because they said we can't go any lower. Construction managers, they'll come in and they'll do some more of the pricing. But yeah, we will definitely not go over.
So that range is a very accurate range, then, it's right, it's gonna be right in there. Okay.
One other, just a fact that's kind of important to note is, the one assumption you have to make is an interest rate assumption. And right now, interest rates, and who knows where they're gonna go, but they're about a full point lower than what we assumed in the calculations. So the faster you
Really?
move forward, you lock in on an interest rate, that's a lot. So that hopefully will give you a little more confidence that
These numbers are gonna be good.
And the numbers was for 4.25 that we
4.25
used?
That we used in the calculation.
And they're at what now?
We're down below 3.5.
If you're in the market right now borrowing for districts that just passed referendums, they are in the process of starting to issue that debt, and they're coming in under 3.5%. The financial advisor that gave the district the numbers, which is Robert W. Baird, so yet another separate consultant, provided the district
Yeah.
with the analysis of the tax impacts that associates with the cost. So the next step is to get the direction from the board to hear clearly what to proceed with for Epstein Ewan and the construction manager that you select this week, or actually officially next week, to get into the scope and understand exactly what work would be done, what would you be getting, how it would be impacted on the site, and to therefore EUA and your construction manager will come back to you in early January with a very defined scope of work with a defined budget. That's when you would be making the decisions about what's in, what's out. Are we putting more in? Are we reducing? All of those things. And that's what leads you to the final numbers that get approved as a ballot resolution and put in front of the community. And ultimately, as you said, Quinn, the community will decide whether or not they are in support of that. And the board, I think, also needs to think carefully about packaging those together or potentially offering two separate questions, which is a very strong strategy to think about when you have a very specific need, like a pool on a different building related to building a new elementary school. Because you will need to communicate about both of them, and then community members could vote on both of them. So it's not like you only have one option. So those are the things I think that are really critical for the board to work through in the next few weeks as your full team comes together and Baird gives you a new estimate and you base on the market. So a few weeks from now, you will have a lot more specific information on the direction you've given us tonight.
And we'd like to really invite the public at our next meeting, next week already, on the 15th, thanks to all of you who came tonight, give us your thoughts again. This is the board's first really chance to really look at the survey results, what we heard from the community. We've been studying these plans for a long time, and we'd really like to work with our community and our staff and our parents to resolve these issues. And, as pointed out, maybe we won't do all of them right now. We'll discuss that at the next meeting, but it is our job to make sure that the public is aware of what these issues are. And we will certainly invite the public in to see the pool, to see some of these issues that are there at the high school as part of the process, especially as we move forward. Any other comments on the timeline? I think Will gave us a big picture. There will be a lot of
I do.
additional meetings.
I have a question on the
Okay.
timeline. This maybe is a Matt and Mark. So the referendum passes in April, then what happens?
Fun stuff.
This is the question I've received
Right.
just tonight, actually, before I came to meeting, I got a call that, so what happened? When does it, because a lot of people, and I have to talk to them and say, well, is this going to affect my kid? And ultimately, I try and steer them away and say, it's going to enhance your property. And maybe enhance your child too, but don't know.
A new building, if it's a new building, construction of that would be about 18 months from shovel on the ground to building being demoed, site restored in the area where the existing building was. That's gonna be about 18 months. That's on a recent project, that's about how long it took for that scenario.
And when would we start that?
But shovel on the ground, right now, we tentatively kind of said February of 2016. Because referendum passes, that's April. We don't have a full design building. We are gonna do quick meetings between now and January 19th. We're gonna kind of get a decent scope in square footage but the details aren't there. And from there, we're gonna, we're gonna be meeting with staff, we're gonna be meeting with administration. There are gonna be a lot of meetings where we have to design a building for this community and not a community that we've done a design
We don't
for in
have
the
them in a
past.
drawer, so.
Yeah.
So I did the math. Would that be a possibility that it would open in the fall of 2017? If we put the shovel in the ground in February of 2016?
Correct.
Probably
It would
right
be
target.
about the fall of 2017. I think that's a good estimate.
Yeah, you don't open a new elementary school like over Christmas if you can help it.
Right.
So you really
Wanna
want
do a-
to make that timeline.
Yeah.
But I think a critical part of what Mark is talking about with the timeline is until the referendum is approved by voters, you don't have the authority to move forward with the costs associated with the project, which is the design. It's a significant cost. You have to get the voters to say, we support this project, move it forward. And when that happens, we go through an extensive process with administrative team, with you, the board, with staff. We need a visionary team to tell us what matters to Whitnall. What does it really look like at Hales Corners? And that takes time, and we need to work through it and come back to you. And that's where the CM role is so critical. And you continue to bring that forward. So you want to make sure all that's in place before you actually go to bidding and start bidding out work and actually start, digging and building.
And there's a lot of checks and balances within that process with the CM on board. We do some design, they do some budget checking, we do some design, and that's how we maintain the numbers that are supporting surveys and referendum questions.
And what about the energy updates? Would those start? Matt?
That could be started sooner. I mean, the scope's defined already for those, so.
Maybe you could bring that with us at the next meeting.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about all of that. And actually,
next
the
meeting.
construction manager component, which you're still trying to confirm, also influences that. And right now, you have two firms that are, who've been shortlisted that will be interviewed, and their input will also drive that heavily. So that's kind of why we were so, recognizing that you were getting support from your community and April was coming, we knew you needed to get going, so we had that resource on board. And so I think you're in a good position to make that happen. And the pool could also have, if that was a separate project, could also have a separate timeline in there as well. So keep in mind, if that was approved, then that pool project could move more quickly than the rest of the new construction. It's really a separate project in and of itself.
So they could be going
We
concurrently?
have a couple different schedules of projects.
And the pool project is a more defined scope already.
Right.
The last thing that I wanted to kind of mention was, do we know when we're going to get that, what is it, the population survey or?
The applied population,
Applied-
she remember when I read it to you guys, she said she hoped to have it to us by the end of this year. I haven't seen it, but since you sent me that email, I put it on my calendar to contact her. It's later this week if I don't hear from her.
Because as we're building or designing, we want to have that.
That would be helpful to know.
That
Good
information.
data to have to
Yep.
influence capacity and answer questions. Because the other part, we talk a lot about what happens up until January 19th, that week when you have to adopt and make final decisions. Keep in mind, that gets you to the point that you can finally tell the community exactly what you are proposing. And then we have 10, 12 weeks that's all about community outreach. It's all about informing and answering questions, and you being resources to your community and being out in the community and holding, tours and conversations and putting out materials that, you know, David and will all work to support you. So there's like distinct phases, and right now the most critical thing we need to focus on is getting you to the point that you have a defined project that you're comfortable with, that you feel is appropriate, and that you can say to the community, this is what you're voting on. That's what the first step has to be at this stage.
I'll just add to that, that as a diverse board, we bring different perspectives from the community. So it would really do our district a great service if we could come to consensus on this. I'm aiming for that. I'd like to listen to everybody's views, and if we're united and we reflect the different views of our community, I think we have a much greater chance of being successful in the future. So that's my goal. Did you have another question or comment? Okay. Well, if not, then we will be moving quickly. Again, thanks to everyone for all the work you're doing on this. Thanks for the survey results. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. Adjourned. Thank you.
What time's our
Wednesday at
conference?
6.
7?